Okay, so today we're going to be talking about my top 7 favorite books of 2021. I did a poll on my, community tab, asking if you'd like me to do my top 5 or just go ahead and extend to my top 7, and you guys wanted top 7, so here we are. I will order these, but truthfully, the order isn't all that important. I loved all these books. I recommend them all. So, coming in at number 7 of my favorite books of the year, we have The Posthumous Memoirs of Cubas. This book was picked up on a whim. I didn't know anything about it. I think I just saw it at a bookstore. It sounded interesting. I don't even know if I read the back cover or if I just looked at the title and thought, that's weird, and started reading. And man, did it surprise me. This book is about a man who died and then wrote his memoirs. And according to him, the story of how this happened in this order is very interesting, but not really worth telling. So we don't get to find out how this phenomenon happened, but then he tells his memoir. He tells the story of his life, and he tells it in this very dry and blunt way of, I'm dead now, so what does it matter? I'll just tell the truth. So he doesn't try to sugarcoat his life. He doesn't try to make his mistakes look better like a lot of us would do if we were telling our memoirs. We might take our greatest faults and kind of smooth them over a little bit so that you can still see my faults, but maybe not to the extent that I see them. He's not that way. He takes us through his life, through his loves, through his ambitions, and through his failures in the most bleak and honest way, and certain scenes are very uncomfortable to read. Certain ideas that he has are very uncomfortable to read, and he just says them with the bluntness of a dead man. Along with that, though, he also has this extraordinary humor, this dry, witty bitterness to the reader, where he will break the fourth wall, which this book, I think, when was it written? 1811, if I'm remembering correctly? Let me see. 1881. I was quite wrong. It was written it was first published in 1881, and yet it was doing so many dry, comedic, and really working with the format in very unique ways that were so innovative for the time. The humor in this, it had me laughing out loud so many times. There are sections where he'll write a chapter and then just stop himself and end the chapter with, "That was stupid. Forget I even wrote that one." Or he'll write a chapter and say, "Tear this page out and put it over in this part of the book. It'll fit better there." Or there was one in particular that just really, really won me. One second. At one point, he's talking about a hat maker, and he just stops to insult me and says, "Obtuse reader, this merely proves that you have never entered the brain of a hat maker." That's not the line I was looking for, but this book is littered with that, where he's just mad at me for not being smart enough to understand him to the extent that he would like to be understood. Oh man, this is great. So there's this part right here. "I am beginning to regret that I ever took to writing this book. Not that it tires me. I have nothing else to do, and dispatching a few meager chapters into the other world is invariably a bit a distraction from eternity. But the book is tedious. It reeks of the grave. It bears a cadaveric grimace. This is a great defect, and yet a minor one on the whole, for the book's greatest flaw, dear reader, is you." It's so funny. He gets so tired of his own writing, and he's just like, "Oh my goodness, I drone on." But then at the same time, he's like, "Really, you're the biggest flaw here." There's even a monologue that he goes on where he's like, "If you would, for anyone who would deign to criticize this book, I have a message for you." And he's just so dry and witty and rude and funny. But at the same time, this book is littered with a lot of very cynical philosophizing. Our main character is dead, and he's come to this kind of perspective of, what was really the point? What are we actually doing here? He makes this observation in the book that the majority of people on this earth, they live, they die, they're uninspiring. And, you know, it's this very cold, calloused, cynical view on life of, I'm from the grave here and I'm here to tell you, why did we do this? And it has this very cynical sort of tone that's balanced very well with the humor, as well as a lot of really intentional, deep diving into the social climate of the time. I will say though, real quick, that my dad, any book that I like, I usually go ahead and download on Audible or buy on Audible so that my dad can listen to it because he has access to my Audible account. And he did not finish this book. And this is coming from the man who I once walked into the room where he was watching a movie and I asked him, how's the movie? And he said, I would rather watch paint dry than watch this movie. And I said, then why are you watching it? And he said, because I started it and so I must finish. And he did not finish this book. So maybe it's just me. Maybe you'll hate it, but I sure loved it. Coming in at number 5 is going to be The Frenchman's Creek. I love Daphne du Maurier. Daphne du Maurier is an author that writes extremely atmospheric, uncomfortable, unsettling books. Everything she writes is so, I feel like I'm there. I feel like I can see and taste it all. And she loves to put you in settings that are very uncomfortable. And I feel it. I feel like I can never, her writing is unlike any other author I've read. I've never been so immersed in a book like I am in a Daphne du Maurier book. I've read a lot of her books at this point. I just discovered her, well, that's not true. I read Rebecca a while ago. I just started reading more of her books within the last probably year and a half, and I've read 5 of her books since then, so 6 books total. And this is my favorite so far, and it's one of her least popular books, I think. So again, maybe my taste is terrible, but I loved this book. It's about a woman who is, she goes off to one of their manors, and she's there's this crew of pirates that docks and pillages and steals and pirates, and she ends up associating with them and going on a pirate adventure. That's how I'll put it. That's how I'll put it. And you know, it was wonderful. And there's so many things that this woman did that I think, what is wrong with you, ma'am? There's so many things, so many moral choices that she makes that I would never. But it was just the way Daphne writes, the way du Maurier writes, I felt like I was on the ship with her. I could feel the sea splashing up and getting in my face and wetting my hair. I could feel the breeze tangling up my hair as I was sailing with the pirates. I could feel the terror and excitement on her first pillage. I loved it. And I love pirate stories anyway. It's something that I just have so much fun reading. But this, because of how extremely immersive it was, even though there are so many things that I could tell you about that I didn't like about our main character's choices, regardless of that, I still just loved this book so much. And it will be a reread soon. All of these books will be rereads. I'm deciding the order of these as I go. Number 654, number 4. I know what my top ones are, I'm ordering them on the fly. So, The Ember Blade. Oh my goodness, I adore this book. And book 2, it's looking like Christopher Wooding? Yeah, Chris Wooding. It's looking like book 2 is coming out soonish. He's finished the first draft. I would say that this is heavily and transparently inspired by Lord of the Rings. He wears that inspiration on his sleeve and yet still does his own thing. So a lot of classic fantasy is heavily inspired by Lord of the Rings. And if you've read very much classic fantasy, then you kind of know how classic fantasy feels because a lot of classic fantasy feels very similar. And The Ember Blade feels like a classic fantasy feels like a classic fantasy to its core while still having a little bit of modernness to it. I personally love classic fantasy, and so this kind of bridge of classic and modern fantasy felt so nostalgic yet fresh to me. Wooding does a great job of really immersing me in the world and making me feel like I'm there, which is one of my favorite things. If you can make me feel like I'm there, it's great. We follow a path that is beaten and worn, but that's still fresh to Wooding's pen. And if you enjoy classic fantasy like I do, then this is just such a treat. And I really do think that he's going to veer off of that beaten path in book 2. I think in book 1, he just wrote a love letter to the Lord of the Rings, which a lot of books have done, and the way that he did it fit me just right. And then book 2, I'm excited to see where he goes. So I loved this. It felt very nostalgic. It felt very familiar and yet so new. There were a lot of things that I could say, okay, according to Lord of the Rings, this will probably happen. And it does. But there were also things that would happen that were so shocking and so emotional and gut-wrenching. And while the characters and so much about this story was familiar, there was also so much that was unique and different to this story that just won my heart. Coming in at number 4 and 3, we have The Bone Shard Daughter and The Bone Shard Emperor. Full disclosure, I haven't actually finished The Bone Shard Emperor at the time that I'm filming this, but I will hopefully by the time that you see this video, and barring an absolutely terrible ending, it belongs on the list. So this series has been so much fun for me to read. The first book follows 5 characters. We have the 2 main are the 2 that I'll go ahead and talk about here. Lynn, who is the Emperor's daughter, who at the beginning of this book has lost her memories, and she, as well as her foster brother, are being raised up to potentially be the next emperor. And it's not a competition, but it's kind of a competition. If she can gain her memories back and be worthy, according to her father, then she gets to be the empress, because she should, because she's the daughter. But the foster brother will definitely take on that role if she can't get her act together, according to Dad. So what she has to do is she has to try to continue her training and try to gain her memories back, and as she does, she earns keys. This palace is full of locked doors, different types of doors with different types of keys. And I don't know what it is about me and keys, but if you incorporate a building with 1,000,000 doors and you don't know what's behind them and you have to get the keys to get behind the doors, I don't know. It's not a very common trope, but I can list like 4 books that have done it, and every time it gets me. Anyway, she has to get these keys in order to get through the doors, in order to find the secrets, in order to understand a lot of the mysteries, the things that her father is hiding about this kingdom. And sometimes she doesn't earn them in the way that her father thinks she is. And then you also have Javis, he lost his wife and he is searching for her, and in the process is kind of a hero of the land. He's smuggling children. Oh, I should tell you the baseline of, man, there's so much to this book. It's so good. So the magic of this world is the bone shard magic, and what it is that only the emperor or empress can control bone shard magic. And when someone is, I don't think it's directly after they're born. I don't know what age they have to be, but at some point in someone's life, any person in this kingdom has to surrender a piece of their bone shard from right behind their ear. And that bone shard is then given to the emperor or empress, and they can use that bone shard to power their magic, and they can create constructs, which are these creatures that they create, that they then use the bone shards to control them, and they're loyal to them, or they can do several different things with the magic, but that's one of the main things. But the problem is, the real conflict is that if you use this bone shard magic, then it could potentially cause shard sickness. Yeah, that's what it's called, shard sickness, in the person who that bone shard belongs to. So it's basically, it could deplete the life from the individual. So this magic system causes some friction within the world. And our main character, she really wants to do good by her country, by her kingdom, by her people, but there's a lot of issues here. There's a lot about this book that as you read it, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I know where we're going. I know what we're doing. I see what's happening here. But you don't. There's things that change, that shift everything, that leave you with these extreme moral questions of how can Lynn navigate this now? What even is the right course of action now? And then Javis, who is smuggling children so that they won't have to give up their bone shards and getting them out. And he's become like a local hero. He's wonderful. And he also has this amazing little sidekick that I probably shouldn't say anything about here. Bone-Shard Emperor is the sequel. As I said, I'm not quite done with it yet, but it's been phenomenal. I think one of the deficits of this book is that it's not immersive enough. I couldn't really see the world, even though I think the world building is very good. I couldn't see the world like I want to when I read books. I couldn't step into the world to the extent that I wanted to. And I definitely felt that more here. And as well as some of there are 5 perspectives, and some of the side perspectives here get fleshed out so much more in this book too. So it's just they're both so good. The writing is extremely accessible. It's very it's not a difficult book to read. I could see this being a story that doesn't suit everyone, but it suits me so well. All right, we're down to the top 2. So next will be One Piece. So One Piece is, you may have noticed I've been talking about it some on the channel. It's a really freaking long manga that when I entered it, did not know how long it was, really what it was about, except pirates, which appealed to me. And I just didn't know. But at first it was good, and then it got good. And now, I don't know, it's amazing. It's one of my favorite series. It's absurd and silly and goofy and so deep and heart-wrenching. It seems so fun, and it gets so deep. It's something that really shocked me at how attached I've been to these characters, how big and vast this world is, how intricate this world has become, and how extremely deeply we explore themes in this story. It has become one that I can dissect and think about and discuss forever, as well as something that just gets me. However, as my husband pointed out to me, I cannot say One Piece in this video because One Piece is a series and I have to pick a book. So a saga is essentially a book, and an arc is essentially a part in the book, to my brain. The saga that belongs on this, I guess I did kind of put these two, but they took up individual slots, so it's fine. The saga that belongs in my top list is gonna be Enies Lobby. I've experienced so much since then, and so much that I've loved, but Enies Lobby has all the extreme emotions, as well as some of the best humor and some of the best crew dynamics and family themes. I mean, family themes are all over this, but you know, Enies Lobby is both emotional and intense and joyful and silly and fun. And as I think through each of the sagas, this one I think is it's the one that hits hard, yet I have so much fondness for. And finally, my top book of the year, my favorite book that I read all year long, I can't find. I've searched. I spent like 20 minutes before I sat down to film looking for this book, and I don't know. I got it from the library. I read it from the library. I loved it. I bought my own copy so I could reread, and I don't know where it is. A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. This is Fredrik Backman's first published book, and it's the book I put off for so long because I have loved Backman's work so much. He's my favorite author, right there. And I have been so afraid to read his first book because I was afraid I wouldn't like it. And Ove is maybe my favorite Backman, maybe. And Every Morning the Way Home Gets Longer and Longer could also be it. It's really hard to tell. Ove is the story following an old, grumpy man who just wants to be left alone. And the world is annoying. He is so similar to so many men that I have known in my life and that I've worked with when I worked at an assisted living home. He is the encompassment of so many old crotchety men. And yet, as we continue the story, we get to know him. And that's who Bachman is as a writer. He sets things up in this very relatable, funny way, and then we go a little bit deeper. And it seems like in almost every one of his books, the core of what he says is, people are flawed, but we're all doing our best. So let's try to give them a little bit of grace. And I mean, he always says more than that. Each book has its own depth to it, but that is something that I see in so many of his books. And in Ove, he's doing it to me again, where he gives me this surface level, funny, relatable, great character, and then we really get to know him. And I've never known a character like I've known Ove. I've never come out of a book in the way that I have this one, where I actually like physically feel like I know this man. He's real. I feel like I should step outside of my door and he's my neighbor. There's his house. There he is working in his garden, angrily grumbling. Also, this is a story, I said this in my review, which I have dedicated reviews for every book that I'm talking about in this list, so they'll all be linked down in the description with everything else. But anyway, also, this is a story where one time Corey walked into my office while I was reading and I was laughing out loud, and then he left and then he realized he forgot something, and literally maybe a moment later walked back in again, and I had burst into such aggressive tears that he was like, "What's wrong?" But Bachman has this ability to just say things in just the right way that doesn't just, it doesn't just hit me and go like, "Oh, wow." But it gets deep into my heart, and it's like, you understand people and you might understand me personally, even though you've never met me. Also, I read Bachman's nonfiction, Things My Son Needs to Know About the World, before I read Ove, which is a collection of letters to his son. And Bachman's love for his wife is just unmatched. I mean, truly, the way this man loves is incredible. And I saw so much of that in Ove. There's so much in the way Ove loved his wife that I just feel like, he wrote himself in this book. But anyway, those are my top 7 books of the year. Those are the 7 books that there are so many books that I loved this year. There are so many books that I considered for this list. But at the end of the day, as I would pick up books and say, maybe The Haunting of Hill House belongs on this list, I really loved this book. The books on this list are the ones that have followed me around. They're the books that have not been able to get out of my head, that when I think about a book that I've loved, when I'm planning a video and I think about recommending something, these are always the first books to come up in my mind. And they're the ones that I can't let go of. So those are my top 7. I would love to hear what your top 7 are, or your top 5 if that's easier for you. And if you've read any of these books, what did you think of them? If you plan on picking them up, they're all linked in the description, but let me know if you're planning on reading them. Again, I have reviews for each and every one of these books, so check that out if you want more in-depth discussion on them. I have loved reading this year. I've had so many great stories that have swept me away. These are my favorites. I have several more videos coming into the year style, so, they'll be here soon. But I post videos every Tuesday through Friday. No, I don't. I post videos every Tuesday and Friday. I'll see you again soon. Bye.